This is the second free webinar in a series we're doing to mark CERIC's 10th anniversary this year. Each webinar features a CERIC project partner offering updates and insights in key areas of career development research. Before I turn it over to Kathy, I want to take a few moments to introduce you to CERIC. For those of you who are not familiar with CERIC, we're a charitable organization that focuses on education and research in career counseling and career development. Bringing you learning opportunities like this webinar is a key part of our mandate. We also host Connexus, Canada's largest career development conference, which is held in Ottawa every January. I want to mention that the content for Kathy's webinar today comes from a new edition of the Decade After High School Guide, which we're excited to be launching at Connexus 2015. In terms of other CERIC programs, contactpoint.ca is our online portal for career practitioners where you can find free articles, resources, and tools to further enhance your learning. As well, we publish the Canadian Journal of Career Development, also free to access online, which brings you peer-reviewed research in the field. And last but not least, we provide funding and other support for research and learning projects in career development, like the one you're hearing about today. I want to encourage you to learn more about our work, starting at the CERIC website at www.ceric.ca. Just a quick bit of housekeeping to let you know that when this webinar is over, we'll send you both the slides and a link to the recording. Included will also be a link to a survey. Please take a few moments to complete that survey. You'll also see on your screen an upcoming free anniversary webinar from CERIC on green jobs. I encourage you to register if this topic resonates with you. A recording of last week's Hope-Centered Career Interventions webinar with Dr. Norm Amundsen can now be accessed online as well. You can find the link at ceric.ca/webinars. Now we're happy to have Kathy Campbell with us. Kathy has over 20 years experience as a researcher, career counselor, program developer, and manager in school, community college, university, and government settings. Kathy recently completed a PhD and was the co-investigator on an earlier CERIC-funded research project called Stories of Transition that was conducted by Dalhousie University. It's my pleasure to turn the mic over to Kathy Campbell. Kathy, over to you.
Thank you, Riz. Just wanted to, just noticing the screen, Norm, I just wanted to make sure that you're seeing, are you seeing my full screen here? Yes, looks like it is now. Okay. Just wanted to start by congratulating CERIC on its 10th anniversary and thank the organization for the leadership role it's taken in career development in Canada over the past decade. On a personal note, I'm grateful for the support they've provided for my research and for the new publications that will be ready in January. Over the next hour, I wanted to share with you some of the key ideas that are in the publication. And as Riz noted, that the book will be launched at Connexus and will be available. It'll be downloadable off the CERIC website, available in ebook form on Amazon, and hard copies will be available. So if you like some of the ideas that you're here in the next hour, please, certainly the publication will go more in depth. And I will leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions. So please feel free to write them. You'll notice on the side panel there's a place to ask questions. I won't address any of them until the end of the session, but we'll address as many as I can at the end. So I just wanted to start by just giving you just a quick sense about my interest in this area. And I very much have, I think, both a personal and a professional interest. And I certainly was one of those people, graduated in the mid 80s of the BA program and was just completely lost, and really took a pretty long, painful process to sort of figure out what I was going to do career-wise. And certainly one of my interests in going into career counseling was thinking, surely it's possible for young people not to, to help them so they don't have to go through the same painful process that I went through. And so ended up working as a guidance counselor, worked subsequently at university, colleges, and, for people who are on EI, helping young people develop return to work action plans. And I was really struck by two things. And I think the first one was the disconnect between the tools that I had in terms of matching people to specific occupations and the reality and the complexity and messiness of of young people's lives and the decisions that they were facing. It just didn't seem to be as straightforward sometimes as the tools that I had seemed to be suggesting. And the other thing I was really struck by was just the amount of anxiety and confusion that young people experience. And I think, if anything, it seems even more so than it was for me back in the mid-'80s. So so I was very interested in doing research, and really wanted to understand more about how do young people actually sort out what they're going to do career-wise. And what are they thinking about when they leave high school, and how does that change over time? So the original research project that was funded by CERIC, we actually interviewed 100 young people between the ages of 23 to 30 in 4 different areas: rural PEI, Halifax, Guelph, and Calgary. And we also went to the literature and tried to understand a little bit more about what other researchers were talking about in terms of this transition from school to work. And out of that came a publication in 2008 called The Decade After High School. So this project started back in April, and I was tasked with undertaking a substantive revision of this guidebook. And in particular, I was interested in examining how changes in external factors since 2008 have impacted the strategies people are using. We've had a big recession since this research was done. And in particular, one of the things that really came out of the original research was just how much uncertainty and unpredictability there was in the career pathways that young people took. Very few of the people that we talked to followed through on the plans that they had when they left high school. And so wanting to understand that better, and in particular wanting to provide strategies to career practitioners who work with young adults. How do you help young people work with this uncertainty? How do you help them be proactive in the face of uncertainty? So this is what this new book was tackling. So I just wanted to, one of the things that in chapter 1, we talk a little bit, and quite brief, it's only about 10 pages, but we really identify 6 themes about what's known about what happens for young people in a decade after high school. And there's been a lot of research done in Canada and elsewhere on this. And there's sort of 6 themes that have come out. And the first one that we know is that the school to work transition is taking longer. At one time, certainly 30, 40 years ago, the majority of young people went straight from high school to work, or didn't go to high school at all, and were able to actually get pretty decent jobs. And of course, things have changed dramatically. Increasingly, young people are going on to post-secondary education. I think the latest stats that I saw, about 82% of high school graduates will, within 3 years of graduating, will go on to university or college. And even people who finish, general bachelor's degrees are finding that they're needing to go back to college or onto, more specific training to get a good job. And in all of that, there's a lot of milling and churning. What we know from the youth in transition research that was done in Canada, that about 25% of people will change their programs 3 times or more, university students. We know that there's a lot of job surfing, and so even once people get into the workforce, they're doing a lot of trying things out to see, in an attempt to kind of figure out what works. And while there's milling, but having said that, this milling and churning is quite common, but certainly there are still people who actually move fairly quickly from high school, post-secondary education, and into the workforce. But I think more and more we see a lot of milling and churning. So we know that this school to transition is taking longer. We also know that there's a lot of identity exploration that's occurring. And one of the things that's happened, because young people are needing to engage in university, college, other types of training, there's this period of time, and Jeffrey Arnett calls it emerging adulthood, this period between 18 and 25 where young people have more time to figure out who they are. And it used to be that we thought at about 18, young people's identity had pretty much been established. But more and more, they have this period of time where they get a chance to kind of try things out. And this identity exploration, what we know happens very experientially. You try a post-secondary program, you try some volunteer work, you travel, you try different kinds of work. And by bouncing up against experiences, you learn more about yourself. So, and again, not everybody does this. Some people feel very much that they need to do what's expected of them and don't engage in this identity exploration. But more and more, we know that young people are using this period of time. Some don't do it at all. Some take short periods of time, and some people are doing it, into their 30s. But we know that increasingly young people are engaging in identity exploration in the decade after high school. So another thing we know from the research is that young people's career plans are actually in many ways, quite fuzzy. We tend to think if somebody has chosen to be a pharmacist or they've chosen to be a mechanic, that this has been something that they've put some thought into. And studies in Canada, Britain, Australia, and the United States really question this assumption, that they found that many young people make decisions based on weak commitments, fuzziness about the future, and limited information. And researchers concluded that the unsearched, unstable, or desperate choices of young people are frequently turned into firm career decisions when factors such as time constraints, unplanned events, and pressure from significant others exert their influence. And so really, collectively, these findings really question whether young people choose a career direction in any meaningful way. And most select from the opportunities that are evident in their environment, and often it's just a yes or no to the opportunities that seem to be evident to them. So really, this idea that young people are putting a lot of time into constructing well thought out plans is really not the case. It's much more incremental. They make sort of small, they may be committed to their next step, but not to perhaps longer term plans. Another thing we know is that the labor market is a very confusing place right now. I think that a lot of the young people that I talked to felt that they did everything they were supposed to do. They went to college, they went to university, they got work experience, and they're still having a really hard time connecting to satisfying work. It's easier in places in boom economies like Alberta and Saskatchewan, but even then, it's not always easy to get into the specific occupation that you want. There's teachers in Calgary that are having a hard time finding work in their area. And perhaps what's most puzzling is that there's a lot of discussion over the last 4 or 5 years or more about skill shortages, and employers are saying that they're having a hard time finding people. And you're kind of thinking, how can this be when more and more people are going on to college and university? And there's sort of various thoughts about that there's maybe a skills mismatch, that young people are not necessarily trained in the areas where there's demand, or there's jobs in Alberta and not so much in the Maritimes. But I think in many ways young people are finding the labor market a very confusing place. And some people are questioning, is it in some areas it's definitely a skill shortage, but in some cases it's almost like an experience gap that employers are wanting, it seems, increasingly sort of employees that can young people that can just come and do the job and without much training. So I think a lot of young people are finding the labor market a very confusing place. And something else we certainly know is that career journeys are very unpredictable. That what a young person thinks that they're going to do leaving high school is likely going to change, and change in very unpredictable ways. A lot of the young people that we talked to, thinking back, ended up doing things that they would have never predicted coming out of high school. And it's not surprising, given this idea that there's a lot of identity exploration. So a choice that may make a lot of sense at 18 may not make sense as you move into your early 20s, as your identity is evolving. And also, there's just so many factors that impact on people's career journeys, and certainly the labor market being a critical one. You may have very well thought out plans and fit very well with your identity, but you simply can't get a job. So, and we also know that chance events play a huge role in people's career journeys. a really big factor that I found. You know, how people's plans changed. Often it would be a chance event with, you know, end up having a brief conversation with somebody, kind of landed a job. They didn't even think they would like it. They took it because they needed a job and end up really liking it. So John Krumholtz and Al Levine sort of talk about that unexpected events are so pervasive as young people's career paths unfold that we really should almost expect them. So we know that career journeys are very unpredictable. And one thing, and this really comes out of my my PhD research, that you know, as much as we know that that most of us, I think, will accept that things change a lot for young people. Young people feel very much that the expectation is that you graduate from high school, you go to college or university, you get a job, and then you retire. And particularly in this piece, so this was something that I hypothesized, and it seemed to see a lot of evidence of in the original research. And what I did this time around is I checked in with young people more about this, and you know, did they feel that this was the expectation? And all of them agreed that this is what they felt was expected of them, which is really quite astounding when you know, on one level we know that change is constant, and yet young people are still thinking that this is what they're supposed to do. And I think it's almost because of culturally we expect. It's almost like, I don't think anybody ever tells young people that this is what they're supposed to do, but this is what they think they're supposed to do. And it's sort of held up as the gold standard, that if you're not doing this, that somehow you're screwing up. And I think a lot of young people do really feel like they're screwing up because this isn't their reality. So I think part of the reason that it's kind of curious as to why this is still, these expectations and beliefs are still there. And I think part of it is that there's just enough young people that actually manage to do this, that people continue to believe that this is possible. And I think also it may relate a little bit to people's just general discomfort with uncertainty. We kind of want to believe that we can know coming out of high school, and we can know in our early 20s what we can do, and we can just go ahead and do it. So I think part of it also relates is we believe it because we want to believe it. And so, you know, so we have this is what people are expecting, but in reality, this is the way it is for most people, for most young people, that there's all kinds of changes, and you know, changing programs, changing, you know, you start in one field and you change fields. What I would say is that what the career myth does is causes a lot of anxiety for young people, because the expectation is something that the vast majority of them can't do, but they're feeling like they're, as I said, they're screwing up because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And my sense is that it creates the very behavior that we actually criticize young people for. So they're so anxious, they're expected to do something that most of them can't do. And so I think that's why we see a lot of procrastination. They're afraid they're going to make the wrong decision. Or we see these very snap decisions. They're very poorly thought out. They choose a career direction without spending any time or very little time investigating whether their choice is a good fit. And I certainly saw this a lot in the research when I would ask people, you know, they chose to go into a very occupation-specific program, and that they knew nothing, next to nothing about the occupation. And I think it's better to have any plan is better than no plan, and I think that's one of the reasons we get so many poorly thought out plans. And so yeah, so these are some of the topics that I talk about in Chapter 1. That gives you a sense of what researchers are talking about in terms of the context that young people's career pathways are unfolding. So, and it's kind of interesting because I think in some ways there's this narrative that, you know, young people have it really easy, that they're a very entitled generation, that they, you know, they have very high expectations, and that they've everything's been sort of given to them on a silver platter sort of thing. But, you know, they're really facing a tough situation. I think often people who don't work with young people don't realize how challenging it is. You know, they're having to spend a lot of time in post-secondary education. Many of them have large student debts. There's this endless sifting and sorting through an overwhelming number of options. There's pressure to settle on a plan, anxiety about making the right decisions, and a really confusing labor market. So I think young people are really, really facing a challenging situation, and I think there's a lot of people, a lot of adults that don't really appreciate how difficult it is for young people. So that's kind of what Chapter 1 talks about. In Chapter 2 to 5, I get into some of what I found in terms of the strategies, in terms of how young people are going about what I call finding their place and figuring out sort of career-wise what their place is. And what I found in the initial research was that they used 3 strategies: navigating, exploring, and drifting. And this is sort of the way that they kind of explore. And navigating, it doesn't sound like an exploration strategy, but it often really is. They choose something. I'm going to be a mechanic. I'm going to be a physiotherapist. I'm going to be a pharmacist. They start heading towards something. Generally speaking, I found in my research that very few of them seemed to know much about what they were navigating towards. The younger they were, the more that was the case. But they're the people that are navigating, that are have chosen something and are moving towards that. And the exploring is that they're trying something out. And that may be like they know they like helping people, they know that they like fixing things, and they're trying it out. They've not made any commitment, but they're checking it out. And the drifting is they do whatever comes up. And I remember when you worked at the Nova Scotia Community College, you used to see this, people would come in the last, middle, end of August and basically say, you know, what program's available? We're going to sign up for whatever was available. You know, they drift into whatever job happens to be available. So sort of doing whatever comes up. Now, the interesting things is that there are good and bad things, or negative and positive consequences for all these strategies. And with the navigating, it works really well if, so say you've chosen engineering, or you've chosen to be a mechanic, and you come right out of high school and you take the training and you're able to get a job in the field. You're able to make a very efficient transition from school to work. But the reality is, for many of them, because so often the plans are not very well thought out, they may really end up somewhere they don't want to be. End up in third year of nursing, and one young person, third year of nursing, and realized she hated it, and but felt kind of compelled to finish it off. So sometimes the problem with navigating, particularly when you don't know much about it, is you may end up somewhere you don't want to be. Certainly another plus from a young person's perspective is they get very positive reinforcement for navigating. People love it. All the adults in their lives love it when they know exactly what they want to do. So in terms of exploring, from a developmental perspective, exploring probably makes most sense. That you maybe ideally have some sense of what you're curious about and what you might want to try out, but you're not making commitments. You're trying it out. So developmentally, it's a very really great strategy. Now, one of the things I found in the research, though, is they get a lot of criticism for using this strategy. Not so much at university, although they can be, a lot of pressure can be put in. You know, you should know exactly what to do so you're not wasting time. But certainly if they're exploring after they finish school, there's a lot of criticism, like just make up your mind. I'm not spending all this money for you to at university to waste your time. So unfortunately, you've got this strategy that's developmentally very appropriate, but they tend not to get a lot of support for doing. And the drifting, I mean, it is a form of exploration. I remember it was funny. I was doing a workshop on this about a month ago, and one young fellow, who was 25, said, "Good. I'm glad to hear that drifting is a strategy." He hadn't necessarily thought of it as a strategy, but sometimes what you'll find is that people will bump into things that they actually like. And I'm thinking of a young fellow who was very happily, very well employed as a dental technologist. And he ended up there because he was working at Canadian Tire after university, and he was on the job bank, and he was just going to take any job that provided on-the-job training. So he really just drifted into work as a dental technologist, but it actually ended up being a good fit for him. Drifting is a little problematic, particularly if it goes on. I mean, for short periods of time, it can work quite well, but if it goes on for long periods of time, you know, if you've been drifting around for 10 years, you may not have a lot to show for it in terms of credentials or in terms of work experience. So then in terms of the place that they find, there's two different kinds of places. One, they may settle and they find a place that's okay for now, not necessarily where they really want to be. And that can happen because of family responsibilities, or can't find work in the field that they're trained for. So there's that. And the other one is committing, and that's for folks who found a place that fits for them. And it's something that they really like, and they're planning to continue doing. Now, what you'll see here, let's see what's going on here. I think there we go. And you'll notice that there's arrows going back and forth from all these strategies, because what I found is that people would use, they might navigate for a while, and that doesn't work out, so they start drifting or exploring, or they settle for a while and they can't stand doing it any longer, and then they start exploring again. Even those that commit, they may find that they have a very busy job and they have kids and they need to find something different because it's just too time-consuming, or they get laid off. So these strategies are, what I found is the same individual, the same young person would use many of these strategies. And sometimes I found it difficult they're not really meant to kind of pigeonhole people into, you know, you're navigating, you're exploring, but more as a bit of a map in terms of what people might be doing. And what's popped up here is knowing what they want. And so there's a whole bunch of factors that seem to influence what strategies they use. And the first one is knowing what they want. And, for example, if you know what you want, it's a lot easier to navigate. And self-awareness, exposure to a range of options, and information guidance for things that influenced people's ability, or people knowing what they want. Generally speaking, most 18-year-olds don't seem to really have a good sense of what they want. So let's see here. Let's try to get another one to come up here. Okay, let's just try that. Messages. The young people hear very powerful messages, and one of the things in my research I would ask them is, nobody has to ever even said this to you. You just know this is what you're supposed to do. And the big one is you should go to university or college. A lot of them said that they heard that, and preferably right after college, right after high school. And a lot of them said they would have liked to take some time off, but felt very pressured. They felt that they should have a plan, particularly after they finished college or university. Got pressure that changing your mind was not a good thing to do, so that woman who was in nursing got to third year and realized she didn't want to really do that, but got pressured to continue doing that. And some choices are better than others. So sometimes what can happen is people can know what they want. One fellow that I was talking to knew he wanted to be a musician, but the messages were that that was not a good choice, and so he ended up drifting around because he couldn't navigate. He didn't feel like he could navigate towards what he really wanted to do. So there's also what we call resistance skills, and resistance skills were the ability for young people to stand up to the messages they were hearing. What I found is that very few young people coming out of high school have those resistance skills. Generally, they grow as time goes on. So that's why so many young people coming out of high school will kind of do what's expected of them. So their tolerance for ambiguity. And this is their tolerance for, in a way, not being quite sure what they want to do. So somebody who has a low tolerance for ambiguity is very likely going to navigate, because they need to know what they're doing. They don't have the tolerance for ambiguity to explore or to drift for a bit. Financial and emotional support, and certainly financial support. We'd have people who, knew what they wanted to do but didn't have the financial support to take the post-secondary program that they needed. Emotional support comes a lot in terms of having their plans supported. So people might know what they want, and may even be supported by people to do it, but they may not have the financial support, for example, to do that. And finally was the employment opportunities. And again, somebody could go navigate towards something, do the post-secondary, successfully finish their college or university program, and then not be able to get a job. And I certainly saw that somebody who was in environmental studies and was working with the department, with Environment Canada, and with all the cutbacks, ended up working at a movie theater. So ended up this sort of settling and that kind of exploring and drifting because of the employment opportunities. So these are some of the things that I found in terms of the strategies that they were using. So one of the things that I would say that from the research, the takeaway for me from the research and literature review is that it's very clear that change and uncertainty are just part and parcel of most people's career journeys. That 10-minute conversation they have with somebody. The labor market doesn't support their career choices, so they have to go off and do something. So change and uncertainty just pervades many, many young people's career journeys. And that, certainly the reality of change and unpredictability is not new to the career development field. That notion that change is constant, it was developed back in the mid-90s with the high five messages. So it's certainly, we talk about in the career development field a lot about change being constant. But sometimes it feels like we bandy it about so much that it becomes almost meaningless. And for a young person to know that change is constant, it's not particularly useful when they're confronted with expectations that they should have long-term career pathways, and they feel the urgent need and the pressure to make a decision. And I find that in many ways in the career development field, we continue to use these sort of approaches that try to match people to occupations. And you only need to look on government websites and the websites of colleges and universities and high schools to see that so often what they're told is to try and, find out what you're interested in, find out your values, what your skills are, and match yourself to a career. And this isn't to say that these tools aren't valuable, because I think they really are. But I do think we really need to reconsider how we think and talk about uncertainty and change when we work with young adults. And I think the challenge is, how do we give them a viable alternative to the career myth? So it is not possible to do that. And I guess the question on the bottom of the screen is, what do we offer to young people if not the mythic idea of security and certainty? And so I think young people really need direction on how to work with uncertainty in a way that goes beyond platitudes. And so the chapter 6 of the guidebook is really all about that. And what it offers is what I'm calling, it offers 8 what I'm calling career crafting techniques. And I take the term crafting from Gray Powell and Norm Abinson, and intentionally use the word crafting rather than more traditional words like planning, management, or decision making, because crafting gets much more the sense that you have to kind of work with the situation, that you can't just decide and implement the plan as though nothing is influencing that. The idea that we need to craft our career, that our careers are going to be a bit unique to the individual. So that's what. So I'm using the term career crafting, and I just wanted to give you a sense of where some of these. We'll present them in a few minutes, but I want to just give you briefly a sense of where these career crafting techniques have come from, because they really come from a wide range of places where that are approaches in career development that are trying to embrace change and uncertainty. So the first one is the notion of positive uncertainty. And this is a fellow, H.B. Galat. Interesting enough, he started off his career as a career development theorist, saying that really believing in rational decision making, and about halfway through his career said, this is ridiculous. There's just too many factors at play for people to make long-term fixed plans. And he came up with a notion of positive uncertainty. And so the idea that it's helpful to have plans because they motivate people, but it's just as important to be open to changing your mind. And this notion of positive uncertainty is something that I found people of all ages, career planners of all ages, seem to really resonate with. So that's one influence in terms of the career crafting techniques. Certainly very influenced by the work of John Crumboltz. And he talks about career development being a learning process. That, and that's one of the reasons it's not possible at 18 to know for sure, because we learn as we go. We learn more about ourselves. We learn more about the opportunities that are out there. And he really emphasizes that we help young people focus on the next step as opposed to the final destination. That really helps to alleviate anxiety. So the next step rather than a long-term plan. And he certainly has talked about the role of happenstance and unplanned events in people's careers, and really recommends that we work with people to be strategic about how do you make it more likely that some really positive unexpected event will occur. So so these are some ideas from John Crumboltz. Robert Breyer and Jim Bright have given us the idea of chaos theory of careers. And they really talk about that unpredictability and nonlinear change should be expected in people's careers, that is actually just the nature of reality. And they emphasize the impact of the butterfly effect, which is where that originally came from, is the idea of, the butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazon and you get a hurricane in Texas. But just that notion that very small things can have a huge impact, and that's something that we can work with and are interwoven in the career crafting techniques. Daniel Rivera-Simard out of Quebec says that yes, there is a lot of unpredictability and a lot of uncertainty, but there is some order to people's careers, and that order is their vocational personality. So while interests and values and skills, and well, those things, not skills so much, but aptitudes, well, those things will evolve and change to some degree over time. Those things are much more fixed. So that's where the role of some of our more traditional tools are very helpful, because it is helpful for people to have a clear sense of their vocational personality. And lastly, Irmenia Vera. And she argues that this idea that we should know before we do has it all backwards. That we know, knowing is a result of doing and experimenting. And she, somewhat, says it's certainly quite a challenging thing to say, is that actually spending too much time planning actually wastes time, because so many pieces of new ideas and bits of information come that once people get moving. So she really advises people to test and learn rather than plan and implement. So you'll see that a lot in the interwoven throughout the career crafting techniques. So, so you'll see both order and chaos. So the career crafting techniques, what you'll see here is woven through the career crafting techniques are the recurring themes of doing and reflecting. And I think all too often young people do one without the other. You'll get some people that are doing, they're do, and without really reflecting. And by doing that, they fail to take full advantage of the opportunity for learning about themselves and the possibilities that are available. And then some people end up doing, they're reflecting but not doing a lot, and that can get you pretty, it's hard to move ahead unless you're actually doing things. So the idea that you need to do both the doing and the reflecting. So in terms of the career crafting techniques, there's knowing that it will be a journey. And under each of these career crafting techniques are strategies. So for each, and I don't know if I'll get a chance to talk about the strategies a lot, but in the book there are strategies under each of these. And one of the key ones is knowing that it will be a journey. And a lot of that, excuse me, is helping to normalize normalize uncertainty, and that they expect that there's going to be change in unpredictability, and so that they understand that what's occurring for them is perfectly normal. And I found for young people, they get a lot of reassurance from that. A second one is actively look for what sparks your interest. And for a lot of young people, and the younger they are, the more this is the case, is they don't really have a good sense of what they're interested in. And so rather than getting too wrapped up in trying for them to figure out exactly what they're interested in, is ask them, figure out, what are you curious about? And try it out. Like, go to that lecture, or go try that piece of volunteer work, or go and talk to that person, but very much being led by their curiosity. And it's a much more sort of freewheeling kind of thing. And find young people tend to respond very well to that, because there's not any pressure. All you need to do is, what are you curious about, and go with that. The next one is what I call a shopping list to guide your journey. And this will be a lot of it will be quite familiar to you, because really what the shopping list is a list of some of their key interests, values, maybe skills that they really want to use. And the idea is that rather than using it as a way, okay, so I know what's on my shopping list, what career should I do, it's used as a way to guide decision making. And again, I have found, and there's a lot of techniques in the book about some really easy ways of developing these shopping list items, and using it as a way that people can think about that they can look at choices without getting overwhelmed by them. And the shopping list really helps with that. Experiment with intent, and again, this will be quite familiar to you. It's in terms of doing initially, maybe doing some research, and then really focusing on some of the options that once you've got a sense that they fit with the shopping list, then going out and experimenting with intent, experimenting with some sense of what might be a good fit. I think we see a lot of experimenting happening very much sort of a trial and error, and people not really doing much thinking about what they're experimenting with. So just a little bit more intention about what they're experimenting with. Create your own lucky breaks, and there's some strategies around how you can make it more likely that that lucky break that you're hoping for happens, that a young person's hoping for happens. Take another step. And this piece is absolutely critical, because I think this is what fundamentally young people need to do, is rather than getting too fixated on long-term plans, is what do I need to do next? So if we as career counselors can, rather than getting the long-term plan, what do you need to do next? And what do you need to next? Learn from it. Take another step, take another step. Just focus on another step. And again, that seems to be very helpful for young people to get their anxiety level down. Plan with a pencil. And this is actually channeling positive uncertainty. And but again, it seems to be a metaphor that young people really like, is that you plan with a pencil. Yeah, you write it down, but your eraser's always ready at hand. And I think young people are much more willing to engage in planning when they know that they don't, when they can change their minds as time goes on, if need be. And the last one is do what you love somewhere in your life. And the somewhere in your life is actually critical, is absolutely critical, because I think there's a sense amongst a lot of young people that they should love what they do. And I think we need to talk about, yes, I mean, ideally you'd really like your work, but that's not always possible. But whatever's on your shopping list that's absolutely essential, it's really important that you do it somewhere in your life, and it may be through volunteer work or your leisure activities. And again, I find people, young people, visibly relax when you say that, because their job doesn't need to be the end all and the be all. If they're having to work at a call center to pay the bills, and are there some other things that they could be doing to make sure that they're doing what they love? So, so these are the 8 career crafting techniques. What I'm going to do is maybe I probably have a chance to show you one strategy. So this one is around knowing that it'll be a journey. And these are 4 of the concepts around normalizing uncertainty, that letting them know that the career journey will likely take many twists and turns, letting them know that figuring out what you do takes time. Your career journey will be unique to you, even if you go into something very traditional like medicine or engineering, that your career journey will be unique. And that the journey is often uncomfortable, because I think often young people think that when it's uncomfortable, it must be because I'm doing something wrong. But it's just being uncomfortable is sort of part of the process. And one of the strategies I was suggesting doing with that is, and it's explained in the book, but you have a piece of paper, and on one, the paper's folded in 2. And you have, first of all, the career myth, and you talk to them about, to what degree have you felt that this is the expectation? And then you show them, well, this is the way it looks for most people, and have them talk about to what degree does this describe their experience. And probably for the majority of them, this second part will be more accurately describe them. And then you have an opportunity to talk to them about the impact that the career myth is having on them. And I've had long conversations with people about the impact of the career myth on them, and that seems to be very helpful. So this process seems to be very helpful in normalizing uncertainty. What I also do, and actually I'm going to quickly show you this one, and this is basically the same information in the diagram I showed you earlier about the strategies. But helping people, like kind of working through that these are strategies that many young people use, and having them think about what strategies they're using. And again, it really normalizes it, and sometimes it'll also get into talking about some of the influences that can influence their career pathways. And I find often after like in an initial, in the intake interview, can use this a way of first of all, they identify what strategies they're using, and then we can talk through some of the influences on the strategies that they're using. So again, this seems to really help in terms of normalizing their experience. So I think I'll stop there. But again, that last chapter is full of strategies. In terms of career design, I think I might just really quickly, and I'm going to just flip through and back to just to the career crafting techniques. One just last point. I did a focus group with these career crafting techniques with a group of 10 people who had recently graduated from university or college, and I explained the career crafting techniques. And what I asked them to do is thinking about their own situation, I asked them to put a star beside which of these career crafting techniques they thought were really useful to them, and to cross out any ones that they thought really didn't speak to them at all. And what was really interesting is that every one of these techniques had at least one star beside it. And some of the ones that some people crossed out were other ones that people put stars beside. And I think I was really seeing that these career crafting techniques are that you can use them. Some may really speak to you as a counselor. Others may. I think it really depends on a young person's situation, your own comfort level. But I think these techniques can be used individually. They can be used in all of them. But I think what you'll find is in any given situation, there'll be one or two that probably speak to a particular young person's situation. So, so those are the career crafting techniques. But as I said, the book will give you a lot more detail on these. So I'm going to stop there and just take questions if anybody has any. And I'm just going to take a look here around to see if there's any questions. Okay, and this is quite well my experience. So just thinking you're going to, so I'm getting some comments. I don't know. I see your e-book, but I don't see the career craft. Oh, okay, so say I see your e-book, but I don't see the career crafting techniques. Are they in the e-book or just in the hard copy book? Yes, I should. The e-book is the one that the publication that was done in 2008. So the career crafting techniques are part of the new publication. So that publication will be available. It'll be launched at Connexus, and it should be available from off the CERC website, hopefully later in January. But thanks for asking that. So I don't see any other question. Oh, here we go. Can you show us an example of a shopping list? Okay, that was actually one of the things I was going to, didn't end up having time, but let me just go back. Just go here. So this is Jen's shopping list. So this is actually somebody that I worked with. And you'll see, basically what I did, it's really used as a shorthand of describing the patterns and themes that develop over time and which reflect a young adult's vocational identity. And what I did is I actually used a lot of norm elements, and some of you may be interested with this pattern identification. And all these, the approach that I used to develop Jen's shopping list is in the guidebook. But a lot of it was asking, like, what are you really attracted to? And then asking, doing on sort of this mind mapping thing about, well, what is it about it that appeals to you? And what I would find is after doing, especially after doing 3 or 4 or 5 activities like that, that you'd start seeing patterns and themes. And just as importantly, I would talk about really, you know, experiences things that really were very negative, things they really didn't like at all. And as Norm said in his webinar last week, that behind every complaint is a value. So when people really dislike something, often it's the reverse. You know, I really hate having to just do the same thing every time. Well, what they want is variety and you know, a lot of variety in what they're asked to do. So that's an example of a shopping list. So let's see. What other questions? Do you find there's a gap in the information coming from high school guidance counselors? Well, what I find in I'm speaking in the Nova Scotia context, but I think I could probably, I've seen this in some of the research nationally as well. I think for an awful lot of guidance counselors, they are so overwhelmed by personal issues that a lot of them don't have the time to be dealing with career issues. And I think in a lot of cases they haven't had a whole lot of training in this area, so they may not feel that comfortable. But some of the research would say that in a situation where, say with a guidance counselor, that unless somebody is assigned specifically to do the career development stuff, the career development stuff is what tends to fall off their plate. So I would say that in Nova Scotia, there's not a lot, the guidance counselors aren't doing a lot of this. There aren't any required courses anymore around career development, so there's certainly a gap there. But no, I would say that the feedback that I got, because that was one of the things from young people I asked them about the guidance, very, very few people got guidance of any kind. So there is a huge gap. Can we see Jen's shopping list, please? Did you have, I have it up there right now. How do you feel about small group activities to support this process? Where might that be possible? No, absolutely. I think, in fact, in that focus group that I was talking to you about, I ended up actually running it as a bit of a workshop. And I found that these, talking about the career myth, there was a lot of great discussion about it, and talking about the career crafting techniques. So no, I think definitely this could be used in, you could definitely workshop this. And I think particularly with, I hadn't developed all the strategies when I did it. I think a lot of strategies would be very conducive to workshops. See what else. Will the slides be available after? Yes, they will. They'll be sent out. Yes. So I look forward to sharing this slide on crafting techniques to youth. Free to share? No, absolutely. More of a comment. Many thanks. Okay. At what age would you recommend we start introducing children to career crafting? I mean, I think really at any, I mean, I started actually talking about some of these, my children are now 19 and 21. I started actually talking with them about some of these ideas, things like positive uncertainty when they were very, probably 10 and 12. So I think anywhere that you think that it fits. Have you had a client who crosses out all the crafting techniques and seems unopen to this view on career development? I haven't. I'm guessing that people who were really completely opposed to this probably wouldn't come and see me, I'm thinking. So I actually haven't run across that. I find that it tends to really resonate with people's experiences. And so if they're interested in engaging in a process, I find them seem to be very open to them. So I think we're pretty much at 2 o'clock. So I just wanted to just thank you for participating in the webinar, and I certainly wanted to thank Sarek for hosting this. And please, my email address is on the first slide, and if any of you would like to talk some more about it, or any questions, please feel free to email me. But thanks again.